But for a child that grows up in this environment, their amygdala is constantly active and they are out of their rational brain, which the rational brain is the part that is developing. And they are living in their survival response, which is freeze, fight, flight, fawn.
Welcome to the Bad Mothers Podcast. I'm Monica Cardenas. Before we get started, a quick announcement that Tam Stevens from the Family Estrangement Substack and I will host a Substack live book club on April 28th. If you'd like to listen in and join the conversation, we're reading Daddy Issues by Catherine Angel. I decided the best way to kick off a season focused on sibling estrangement was to learn the dynamics at play in a narcissistic family system. And who better to talk to than Dr. Katie McKenna? Katie is an accredited psychotherapist who specializes in parentification and emotional abuse. She works on breaking generational trauma so women can have healthier relationships by recognizing everyday toxic and narcissistic communication patterns or behaviors that have become normalized, particularly in families. She's accredited by the Irish Association of Counselling and Psychotherapy. She's a fast talker full of fascinating and helpful information for estranged adults like myself, so hold on to your hats. Here's Dr. Katie McKenna. You are a psychotherapist that deals specifically with parentification and emotional abuse. Can you tell us what made you decide to focus on that particular aspect of childhood emotional abuse?
I can, and that's because it's familiar to me. When I first started showing up on social media, I used to say I was just fascinated by the topic and interested in other people's behaviours. But the truth is that this is something that was familiar to me. When I went to train as a therapist, it was actually to help my family dynamics, help my parent that I thought was struggling with depression, help to learn the tools to be able to help them navigate even their marriage better, which is the role that I was put into, being this mini therapist, this confidant, there's 3 different types of parentification: emotional parentification, instrumental, and narcissistic. I can go into them further if you want. And the more that I learned and understood it, and what I thought I was doing was being of service and that I needed to help or fix or rescue other people, what I actually learned was that I needed to rescue myself.
Wow. That must have been a shocking revelation when it happened, huh?
It was a hell of a shocking revelation, but it was a very slow one. I was a slow learner. This is not something that I just woke up one day and it was like, oh my God, this is really harmful and dysfunctional. Because when you grow up in dysfunction, and in particular with narcissistic family systems, it isn't typically isolated to then just your immediate family with your own mother and father and siblings. So you'll have this from extended family that encourage the system to continue and enable it. So hearing things like, well, that's just your mother or that's your father, or you know what they're like and just keep the peace, and you know it's a long road and don't cause any ructions or don't rock the boat. So you're always encouraged to tolerate and enable the abuse.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about those 3 types of parentification? Because I think that will be relevant to the rest of our discussion here about sibling estrangement.
Absolutely. So emotional parentification is when the child is the parent's emotional confidant, when they are their mini therapist, their secret keeper, where the parent shares all their struggles with them and leans on them. Typically, we can hear the parents say that their child is their best friend, which is a real red flag. And they can even treat that child like a substitute spouse. There's then instrumental parentification. So if we think of emotional as just being that, the emotional support, instrumental then would be all the practical things. So we can see where the sibling has to be the parent to their siblings, where they're helping the other kids with their homework, getting them out to school, doing the cooking and the cleaning, paying the bills, managing, hospital appointments, doctor's appointments. So they have responsibilities that are beyond developmentally appropriate. But ultimately, with the 2 of them, it's really a role reversal where the child is the parent to their parents, right? So they're carrying huge responsibility. And then there's narcissistic parentification, which incorporates both emotional and instrumental parentification. But this is its own dynamic where the parent projects an identity onto the child. So when you're talking about sibling estrangement, this is really comes into play here with narcissistic parentification. So if you think of the narcissistic parent sitting at the head of the table, and if there's siblings then taking a seat at the table, the parent has a role placed for each of those children. So typically we see 4 places in the family. So there's the golden child. That's the child that can do no wrong. Typically what I would hear is people saying they could get away with murder, right? The parent thinks that the sun shines out of their, I don't know if I can say that on this podcast, or you know what, and they're never to blame. So typically, even if we see siblings that are, if one of them is coming to their parent saying, like, for example, he hit me, if that's the golden child, it will be said, well, what did you do first? What did you do to annoy them? So you're always being blamed, and the golden child is never held accountable. This is the child that, like, so for example, if they only come home once a month or once every 6 months, they're praised for being wonderful. Yet the children that are home weekly, they're being criticised. So this is the role, they're wonderful, and everything that the parent thinks that is good about themselves is projected onto this child. Then if we look at one of the other roles, one of the other seats, there's the scapegoat. And that is the child that is blamed for everything, that everything goes wrong with the family, that it's your fault. And that child is, the scapegoat is typically scapegoated from birth. So can hear the narcissistic parents say that it was a difficult pregnancy, that they were a difficult baby, that they never did anything right. So that they're blamed for being the problem child from birth. Then we have the invisible child. And that child is just that. They're invisible. So that child is typically forgotten about, ignored. The invisible child can really escape into books and their imagination when they're a child in order to kind of keep themselves safe and have a sense of community. But ultimately they're ignored, they're forgotten about, they're never thought of, or if they are, it's an afterthought or last minute. The parent won't even be able to really say what this child has done, you know, what their profession is even, right? They just are that, they're invisible. And then there's the gilded child. And the gilded child is often the child that can think that they're golden. So we can see this especially when it comes to the emotionally parentified child, the one that thinks that they're really close to their parent, again, being their confidant. But what they discover is when they actually say no and begin to hold boundaries or autonomy with their parent, they can actually see that they were scapegoated all along because they're not allowed their no.
Wow. Yeah, hearing
Sorry, that was a lot, was it?
Yeah, hearing that now, things are starting to make a lot of sense within my family, which I'll tell you, I have 5 younger sisters. The youngest 2, though, are my half sisters that my dad and stepmom had. So they didn't grow up in the house with me and my other 3 sisters.
Okay.
So I'm the oldest of my parents' children. There were 4 of us, and we lived with my mom after my parents divorced. So the 4 of us now are estranged from my mom, and we have been for almost 20 years now, since I was 25-ish.
Okay.
So, yeah.
That's unusual.
Those
we typically
roles,
wouldn't see that. Yeah.
Those roles make a lot of sense for the 4 of us, I think. I can see them sort of, some of them shift around a little bit, though. Does that make sense?
It does. So these can be rigid, but typically they move, and they move in relation to the child's behaviour. So let's say that this was either the gilded child or even the invisible child. If they do something wrong, step out of line, really upset or piss off the parent, they will immediately be placed in scapegoat role. And the scapegoat child can have a brief, like a preview of being the one that is fixated on that they're to blame. Which is why then, when you're talking about sibling estrangement, that everybody wants to get closer to the parent to avoid being attacked. Yeah. And so there's safety for the other children when you think the children in the situation are just trying to survive the situation. And so they're also gaslit. When these roles are really rigid, they're gaslit into believing the things that they're told about the children. But there can be huge resentment, for example, for the golden child because the kids are pitted against that child. So a lot of people think the golden child gets away scot-free because they're the one that is what seems to be praised and never is held accountable. But that child then, when they grow up, really struggle then with accountability and struggle with entitlement because they've never been held accountable. And there'll be resentment within the family because they are the one that can typically gaslight the other children and say, what are you talking about? Like, my mother was wonderful or my father was wonderful. Like, you're crazy. Like, this never happened. And if it did happen, well, you deserved it because you were being, like, quote unquote bad. So this is where, when, let's say, the scapegoat child has been vilified, but now suddenly, if the spotlight, if you will, is going to be on somebody else, they can breathe a sigh of relief and even hope that, oh, maybe this is going to be different. Maybe I can get closer to my mother or father and they're not going to attack me. So think of this like a parent wielding like a machine gun. Yeah, we want to get closer to avoid being hit. And because what happens in these family dynamics when somebody is being hit, and when I say being hit, this is with mocking, shame, criticism, ridicule, the rest of the family can either intentionally or unintentionally gang up and then enable this behavior further.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. And, the more I looked at sibling estrangement, I should say, when I first began studying estrangement more generally besides my own, and I learned about sibling estrangement, I was really surprised until I started hearing it explained similar to the way that you just did, and that you're trying to survive, right? And maybe if you haven't seen your parent for who they are or for what they're doing, you instinctively side with them and see your sibling as the problem. And I know with my own mother, if that were the case, I would be expected to have loyalty to her and not one of my sisters, right? And so if that continued into adulthood, I could easily see how that estrangement can happen, because the requirement for being in relationship with my mom would be to be on her side no matter what, right? There's no nuance to it. There never could be.
Yes.
But I think what happened with my sisters and I is we were always on each other's side privately, right? So it's like we all understood we were playing a game, and we said what we had to, but in private, we, would give each other looks or say, this is just because of mom. This is just to keep mom happy, that sort of thing. So I guess in that way, we weren't entirely gaslit by her. I don't think, maybe we never were completely, because I feel like there was always an awareness that we were doing it to keep her complacent.
So I agree with everything that you're saying. And for when sibling estrangement happens, it doesn't mean that the other siblings did not, one, see the abuse or did not recognize. And because what you're talking about there is, in order to be in a relationship with an abusive parent, what you need to be is silent and complicit. Yet you don't get to have your own opinion, your own wants. You don't get to say no. So I hear what you're saying, that you, the siblings, like, would have knowing looks at each other and be like, okay, this is just what we're going to do in order to survive and get through this. What can happen is that when the parent really is successful at driving a wedge between the siblings, so where they can triangulate, say that one child has said something against the other one. Oh, well, how are you doing today? Your sister said blah about you, or your sister criticized you, or she was given out about you, right? And when we think in healthy environments, like, I have 4 kids myself, my kids, it is healthy for them to come to me to complain about their other siblings. That is very normal. But for a narcissistic parent, they will weaponize this. And again, you think of kids when they're younger or in their teenage years or even 20s, when they're really pissed off at their sibling for probably valid reason for doing X, Y, or Z. But this will be weaponized about a narcissistic parent, and they will use that as ammunition about the thing that they said. But they will also elaborate and lie. I was going to say myths, truths, add lies. And really pit you against your sibling. So when this is done for years, subtly, it can build up resentment then towards the siblings. But as well, what the narcissistic parent uses is motivational empathy, where typically that's known as guilt tripping or pulling on your heartstrings. So they can apologize to the other sibling. Let's say there's sibling, A and B. And the parent then can go to sibling B and say, well, I really love sibling A and I didn't mean it. And, I'm just trying to do my best and I'm really sorry. Right? This is all manipulative in order to get sibling B to be a flying monkey and carry that back. And sibling A can say, well, I want them to say this to myself, or they never said that to me and they have to be held accountable. And now sibling A and B can start fighting with each other. And the parent is nowhere to be seen in this. And this is very intentional. This is a strategy that they use to deflect, to avoid accountability. But it can cause arguments then amongst the siblings, because sibling B now has had their empathy elicited and weaponized against them. And now they are fighting their mother's battle. So let me just jump here. Do you remember earlier when I was talking about the positions at the table, and we're talking about the narcissistic parent at the head of the table and the siblings? One thing that we didn't mention here, and I know that the name of your podcast is called Bad Mothers, and we're focusing on narcissistic mothers, and typically, that's the more covert behavior, more manipulative, or it can be overt too. But what I would typically see at the other end of that table, if they're not an abusive parent themselves, an overtly abusive parent themselves, what we would see is an enabling parent. So when I get letters into the podcast, it's generally all about one parent, typically about the mother. And then I'm asking the question, well, where is the father here? Where is the father saying no to this behavior? Where is the father enabling it? And again, we talked about it earlier, saying, well, that's just your mother. You know what she's like, and bringing them back into the fold. So I don't know if that's something that when we're talking about sibling estrangement, if you're able to share your father's role in that, or where he was at the table, or if he was at the table.
Yeah, he wasn't for most of my childhood. I would say they divorced when I was 11 or 12.
Okay.
So we would visit my dad. We would talk to him on the phone often, and we would see him on the weekend and maybe stay with him for a bit in the summer. And he was married, and he had 2 more daughters with his wife.
So then what you're saying is that you had a model for somebody that actually didn't have to stay in the situation. And you also, your nervous system got to see what it was like in somebody else's home. You got to see what love looked like from him in his relationship then with his new partner, how they parent their children. Also your own nervous system, how you are in his house versus your own house. So this is where people say, oh, we stay together for the kids. But here your father was able to show you, one, you don't have to stay in abusive relationships. It's healthy to step away. And yes, that is so hard then around access to the children. But for you, the children, you weren't punished by your father then, I imagine, when you were stepping away. You weren't encouraged to stay in a relationship. You were able to see somebody step away. But then it's a healthy parent that doesn't enable you to go back further. So in terms of sibling estrangement, the enabling parent is a huge part that is actually, when we were talking about like how the narcissistic parent weaponizes the children and pits them against each other, the enabling parent is huge in this part. And it actually can be so hard for somebody to realize that, yes, that parent was abusive, but this parent enabled it. This person didn't stop it. And this person then is making up lies about me to my siblings and other people because they don't want to admit the abuse that they have overseen or allowed. So now they're scapegoating me. So an enabling parent is huge in terms of sibling estrangement. And so I wonder how much that played a part, that your siblings actually, that you've got to have a healthy relationship by this dynamic. It mightn't be the only reason. I'm not taking away from your own work that you have done, because you would have to each have done your own work. But that element to not separate yourselves further, I just wonder if that played a part in it.
Yeah, it does make sense when you put it that way, because he was another place that we could go. And he never framed it as like me against her, or, dad against mom.
Yes.
He would never frame it that way. She would.
Yes.
But that just made it a safer place, right?
Yes.
Because we could go to him and he wouldn't say, you have to choose. He would just be there. Whereas my mom made us feel like it was one or the other.
Yeah.
So yeah, that does make sense. And in the end, I mean, I wouldn't say we chose my dad, but I guess, the example I always give when people ask about the estrangement, and this is incredibly simplified, but it seems pertinent now, is I think about, okay, if I had a relationship with my mom and I flew back to the States at Christmas, I would spend it at my dad's house. And my mom would flip out. She would probably just stop talking to me for months on end, right? So she would force me to make that choice. Whereas my dad would probably say, well, I don't mind. Go stay with her if it's going to keep her happy and it's going to help you relax or whatever. Yeah. And that's sort of the dynamic we lived with as children too.
So I know you're saying this is simplified, but ultimately what we're talking about, the thread is that your mother is looking for her own need to be met and be centered, and she's going to punish you if you don't do that. But your father is looking at what's best for you. So that doesn't mean that he doesn't miss you or he doesn't want to see you. And he can even say that without guilt tripping, right? And without the punishment. It'll be, oh, I'd love to see you, but come here, go and do what you need to do. Me and you can catch up next time. Like, I'm here. And if anything happens, you can come to me. So that is allowing the adult the autonomy and not denying it. Yeah.
Yeah. When these things happen in childhood, what do we see happen to those adults? I mean, say they do become estranged, or with my sisters and I, we remained close. But what sort of behaviors do you think we could expect from, for example, a parentified child as an adult if they don't explore these emotions?
Yeah. So all the children are parentified in different ways. All of them have to become adults and aren't getting the nurture and care and their needs met, even the golden child. So what we would typically see, and I've co-written a book, it's called You're Not the Problem. And it is for people to recognize the things that we learn, the coping mechanisms that we use to survive and how they helped us in childhood, but ultimately can hinder us or actually be destructive to us in adulthood. So if you imagine a diagram, and on the one side, we have hyperdependence. So that's typically known as people-pleasing and codependency. So this is the person that can't say no to anyone and they do everything for everyone else, right? They feel responsible for other people's feelings. They have a huge fear of conflict and they can feel anxious and guilty when other people have a problem, right? So let's say your cousin's friend's brother needs to go to the airport at 2:00 in the morning. This person will feel like this impulse to be like, oh, I can do that for you, right? And they're going to feel really guilty if somebody else is struggling, if they're not the one that's going to fix and rescue them. And then they can wonder why other people don't give and do the same to them. So they can actually become resentful then when other people say no, because it's like, well, I never say no, so why won't you do the things for me that I do for everybody else? They also then can feel like a burden asking for help, right? So because they anticipate everybody else's needs, they want other people to do things for them that they don't have to ask for. Because again, this was conditioned in childhood that there's such a fear in asking for help. One, that you're going to be disappointed, right? So that if you're told yes, you're going to end up disappointed. But especially that it will be weaponized against you, that it'll be held over you, that you'll be under a compliment to somebody else. So their nervous system learns that it's actually not safe to ask for help. And they've learned that they've been conditioned and told that love is that you do the thing for the other person without having to ask for it. Typically, again, what we see with this group, the hyperdependents, they over-apologize. They apologize for everything. They apologize nearly for existing and taking up space. They overshare. They can be very attracted to needy people because this is where they get their validation, that if I can be of service, well, then I am a quote unquote good person. But ultimately, they think that they're unimportant, right? So they don't get to identify their own wants and needs. And so that's the hyper-dependent, the people pleaser and the codependent. And so if we think of a Venn diagram over the other side, we're going to see hyper-independence. This is somebody that keeps people at arm's length, that struggle to trust others, even close friends, right? Even somebody that's married, even their spouse. They are so hyper-independent, they decide everything by themselves, right? So they would never ask for help either. But the difference with this person is they have no problem saying no to people externally. So think work colleagues, people that they don't consider close. But for the hyper-independent, if somebody like swims over the moat and climbs over the wall and gets into their inner circle, the hyper-independent also can't say no to this person that they love because they can feel this intense guilt. They're very guarded in all their relationships. They're very private about their private life. They don't delegate tasks, again, doing everything from themselves. They typically are not drawn to needy people because this can feel smothering to them, which is why, we're talking about keeping people at a distance. And so often this can be a struggle in long-term relationships because ultimately what we want in long-term relationships is connection, right? Somebody to be vulnerable and share. But for the hyper-independent, this is very difficult. So they're the two sides. And again, if we think of a Venn diagram, there's going to be an overlap in the middle, because both of these behaviours look nearly polar opposite to each other, whereas they can show up different depending on the relationships they have. But typically somebody will lean more to one side or the other, right? So they can recognise, no, I'm the people pleaser. Oh, but I have some of this hyper-independence, or I'm the hyper-independent and I have some then of this hyper-dependence. But the wound is the same, the wound that it comes from. And this is the overlap in the Venn diagram. So this is the wound that it comes from, what we see, which is perfectionism, fear of rejection, a fear of intimacy, a fear of abandonment, a fear of vulnerability, a fear of asking for help, a lack of identity to identify my own wants, needs, and preferences, and hypervigilance. So a lot of people would say that I'm an empath, whereas actually, I don't think that an empath exists. What they're talking about is hypervigilance, where I've learned to read the behavior of a person to be able to protect myself. Because if I can predict it, there's power in that, because then I can either know how to manage it, control it, avoid it. So typically the child that grows up in this environment is able to read so much from somebody's body language, from their sigh, from how they walk, from anybody listening. I wonder what it's like for you when you're sitting on the couch watching TV and you hear somebody coming in the front door, right? For a child that has grown up walking on eggshells, typically it's that they have to make themselves look busy, that they were tidying or that they were doing something, because you're laughing there, yeah, because rest is going to be punished. So this is the way our nervous system then shows up in adulthood.
Yeah, I should say I'm not laughing because that's silly or anything. I'm laughing because
it's a knowing
I feel
laughter.
Like you are talking about me. Wow.
Okay.
It's been a few years since I've been in therapy. I did after things went wrong with my mom, but it's just strange to hear it, so much familiar instincts described by you, who I've just met, because I guess it's unfortunately a common thing that people suffer with. And I think there's probably so many people out there, as you said, that might describe themselves as an empath, or just think it's my personality, and it doesn't need to be that way.
No, and I know that I call it knowing laughter. It's that like, oh my God, yeah, I can relate to this so deeply. And here's the thing. So on social media, when I talk about in particular the fawn response, so when I'm talking about survival response, people typically know it as fight or flight, but it's actually fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So if we think of the hyper independent, they're leaning more towards their fight response. No, I can stand up for myself. No, you keep a distance. I know myself. But really, it's armor that they've worn to protect themselves so that they don't get hurt, so that they're not disappointed. Because if we try to lean on somebody and now you're going to disappoint me. Well, now I'm going to be more hurt. So why bother asking you in the first place? I'm just going to do this myself, right? And the flight is somebody that keeps very busy. Go, go, go. I can't switch off. I can't rest. I can't stop. I'm just constantly busy, cleaning, working, doing. I always need to be on the go. My head's working like a million miles a minute. We have the fawn response, which is what we're talking about there, the people pleaser, avoiding conflict, fear of conflict. I will appease you. Pete Walker talks about that the price of admission to any relationship for the fawner is the abandonment of self, right? So I don't get to exist, that I have to blend and morph into what you want. This is where we see people that if they're in different groups, that they will become the group that they're with. So if I'm over here with a green group, I'll be green. And if I'm here, I'll be a blue group, right? I won't know my own identity. A lot of people that are neurodivergent can call this masking. But if we've grown up masking so much, we don't know who we are. And then there's the freeze response. This is the rabbit in headlights. I don't know what to do. I can feel paralyzed and trapped, and I'm really stuck and I can't take the next step. So these 4 responses are really healthy. And so you think that if somebody is standing in front of me and is going to attack me, depending on who that is, my brain will decide so quickly without conscious thought, am I able to fight you? So if this was a 9-year-old child, I'm not scared. I'm not scared. I'm going to be able to get out of the room, right? But if this is a 40, 50-year-old man that is bigger than me, I'm not going to be able to fight him off. So my body needs to respond differently. So I might try to fawn, to appease him, to agree to what he wants in order to get myself safe. If something horrible is going to happen, when I think of the freeze response, rabbit in headlights, when I think of rape victims where they dissociate to the point that they're out of their body, and so that they can't connect with the feelings in order to protect themselves. Or flight, I'm going to try and get out of the room. But again, for the child, flight is not an option. You can't escape the home. You have no money, you have no other house to go to. And for a child, this feels never ending, right? For my kids, think of this, a child thinking 2 weeks before Christmas. Like, it's so long for them. They can't think of a time when I'm 18 or 20 when I can move out and have my own life. So our survival response is really healthy to go into our survival response and to toggle back out of it. If anybody listening puts out their 5 fingers so that you're showing me like the palm of your hand. And if we place our thumb into the center of our hand, bend our thumb in, this is our amygdala. This is where if we feel fear, that our body is going to respond with adrenaline. And so this top part, our 4 fingers, this is the front of our brain, our prefrontal cortex. This is the part of our brain that isn't fully developed until it's 25. This is the part that considers and thinks out logical solutions. Okay, so we're going to cover our thumb now with our 4 fingers. This is when we are regulated, when people would say we're calm, when we're able to make decisions and think logically. But when there is a threat, or when for people that have grown up in unsafe environments are triggered, this part of our brain becomes active, our thumb, and we're going to flip up our 4 fingers. We are out of our rational brain now, and we are in survival mode. So we're going to be behaving out of one of these 4 places: freeze, fight, flight, fawn. That is appropriate if there is a threat in front of us. And what is healthy is when we escape from that threat, that we toggle back into our parasympathetic. Right? So our 4 fingers come back down. We're met with safe community. If somebody done something, hopefully they're going to be held to account. People are, going to comfort us. So there's safety in the aftermath of the threat. That is what healing is about. But for a child that grows up in this environment, their amygdala, so their thumb, is constantly active, and they're out of their rational brain, which the rational brain is the part that is developing. And they are living in their survival response, which is freeze, fight, flight, fawn. So on social media, I talk about the fawn response quite a bit. So do you fear conflict? The thoughts of somebody not liking you? Does your heart start beating faster? Do your hands get clammy? Are you unable to even sit with the thought of somebody you don't know not liking you, right? Is it a threat to your nervous system? And people say it's something similar to what you said. Oh my God, you know me so well, and it's so strange to hear a stranger describe me. And the truth is that no, I don't know you or your personality, but I know your survival response because it's predictive. Because as humans, we will predict this, we will behave a similar of ways under the same threat. And so what the work of healing is actually to recognize what our survival response or our trauma response is, have safety in our own bodies and in our relationships. So we are able to toggle into parasympathetic, and we are able to get to know our own wants and needs, because I don't know people's favorite movie or their favorite food or their favorite comedian or what they don't like. And so this is the part that makes up somebody's personality. And so, yes, I'm able to talk about somebody's survival response, but it's actually who they are and what drives them that makes them them. And this is the part that was denied in narcissistic family relationships, right? That part that they get to develop their no in comfort and be able to, take a step away from the family system healthily and be able to welcome back in. Whereas for a narcissistic parent, that's such a threat. And then you can be discarded from the family. There can be a smear campaign, the silent treatments used, stonewalling. Yeah.
Say a child grows up in this environment, in adulthood, they recognize it. Is the work involved to not live in that state of fear? Are you saying the work is to get to know yourself more, get to know your likes and wants and needs apart from surviving in your family?
That's a really good way of putting it. Yeah, I would say that kind of 50% of the work initially is being able to recognize what abuse is. A lot of people think that abuse is only physical or sexual abuse. And while that is abuse, a lot of people aren't aware of what emotional abuse is, especially if they've grown up in it. I know myself and with my clients, it's different now because I am on social media and people come to me knowing this expertise. But before I was on social media, I would be getting clients referred to me through GPs. And so somebody would be coming, presenting with anxiety or depression, and they would be coming in saying something similar. Let me share my own story. So when I went to train as a therapist, I was in my early 20s. And I was in that class thinking, my family is wonderful. They're the best. I want to know how I can be of more service, what I can do to help and to fix the situation and the difficulties. And I remember in that class, the tutor, and I can't remember the statistic they said, but they said something like 70% of you who are going to graduate are going to discover things about your own family of origin or relationships, and it's going to end the relationships. And I remember sitting there, talk about denial or innocence or ignorance, and I was sitting there thinking, oh my God, these poor fuckers. So not me, right? These poor fuckers, because my family are wonderful, right? Not that I was wonderful, but the image that I had of my family is, they would do anything for you and family comes first and, all these kind of positive attributes, which they can be, but not if it's done under control, not if it is only about the family and other people aren't allowed into the family system, unless, of course, they bring a benefit, but ultimately they're going to be punished, that it's kind of us against them. Us against you. And so it took me a long time to learn what emotional abuse was. I thought the silent treatment was normal. I just thought that's what parents did to kids when they were annoyed. Yeah. And so learning that the silent treatment, especially from parent to child, is psychological torture for a child. The child will do anything in order to restore that safety. So which is typically why we would see the phone response come in with a parent. Please, mommy, no, I didn't mean it. I'm sorry. And they're apologizing for something. One, they didn't know what they did wrong, or they're just trying to get back to that safety in their body. And it's some sort of modicum of safety within the relationship.
What other types of emotional abuse, like practical examples, would you give besides the silent treatment, which I experienced as well? I thought it was normal. And now when I think about it, it is the worst kind of torture.
Yes. Narcissistic parents, I break this down into 4 different categories of narcissistic parent. So there is the critical parent. That is the parent that is not happy with anything the child does. Nothing is good enough. They will criticize your hair, your weight, your clothes, your driving, your parenting, your job, your tone, your cooking, everything. It's typically what we hear, or what I would hear when somebody comes into therapy. It's like, she's never happy. It's all about her. Or, he's very critical. Nothing I do is good enough. But even this parent then, to strangers, they can praise the child, which can be very confusing. But the praise is actually all about them saying, look what a good parent I am, and is not about the child. Then we have the ignoring parent. So this is the parent that ignores the child's needs, won't ask them any questions, won't go to see the child. They're very entitled. It's all about you coming to me. They won't be interested in the child's day, in their emotions, or how they're doing, because this is the grandiosity trait. It's all about them. The world revolves around them. Then we have the engulfing parent. And this is the opposite of the ignoring parent. This is the parent that wants to be involved in every single aspects of the child's life in a really unhealthy way. So the child doesn't get to have any boundaries, any privacy will be considered a betrayal to the parent. You should have told me first. Why did you tell them? I'm your parent. Of course I should know. They want to know every aspect of their child's life. Typically, this is when we can see the parent that says, my child is my best friend. Yeah. And then we have the 4th, which is actually a combination of all 3. So maybe for yourself or for any of the listeners, they might strongly lean towards one parent and be like, oh yeah, that was definitely my parent. But they will hear the other aspects. It's the same as with the roles. Because for any of the roles, they will all be invisible to some extent to the parent, because it's all about the parent, right? That the world should revolve around me. So all the child's needs are going to go ignored. They're not going to be met because it's all about meeting the parent's needs. And so when we're talking about then the different category of parent, we're going to see that even the engulfing parent is going to be ignoring, because they're ignoring what the child wants, ignoring what the child needs. They're going to be critical when the child says no and wants something different. Yeah. So that constant criticism, if we go to the first one, just erodes a child's sense of self. It chips away at their very essence. And so they don't get to have a healthy belief that I am a good enough person, that I am capable. When I look at this, for a narcissistic parent, it's all about control and dominance. And so one of the things a parent will do is try to take away your sense of capableness and that you can do, because ultimately they want you dependent on them to reduce your freedom, unless you, of course, are doing something that gives you prestige or title that the parent will want, because then this is a reflection on them, or if you're earning loads of money, because then the parent can exploit them. So I don't know if I'm going a little bit off topic when I'm talking about then the 4 types, and maybe if I talk to you a little bit about maybe the 5 traits of narcissism, that might give you a better understanding than what we're talking about emotional abuse.
Yeah, sure. So these are the 5 traits that we might see in a parent that is emotionally abusing.
Yeah, a parent or anybody that has narcissistic personality disorder. So these are the 5 main traits. So there's 9 traits altogether in the DSM, but this is the 5 main traits. So the first one is grandiosity. This is where it's all about them. They think the whole world revolves around them and you are there just to meet my need. Think of the sun, right? They think of themselves as the sun and you just exist to revolve around me. But you only exist when I need you. Right, you're a commodity to me. If I don't need you, I won't think of you. You won't be in my vision at all. I only think of you when you're there for me, for my needs. Then we have exploitation. So if we're focusing on the narcissistic parent, they will exploit anything and everything they can with the child, right? So finances, friendships, status, relationships, anything that they can get for their own gain, they will exploit it. And that is because they feel so entitled. That's another trait, right? So grandiosity, exploitation, entitlement. They will feel entitled to, again, every aspect of your life. Your information, your privacy, your money, your life, your friendships. They want to be included in everything when it suits them. And then they have, we touched on it earlier, motivational empathy. So there's a lot of people think that a narcissist has no empathy. One, they can have performative empathy. They know what this looks and sounds like if they're talking to a stranger, or if they're trying to divide the siblings, they know how to perform empathy, which is very manipulative. And they will try to elicit somebody else's empathy or guilt trip them or pull on their heartstrings to use it against them. So weaponize somebody's empathy against them. That's what motivational empathy is. And then a lack of self-awareness. They know that if I do A plus B, it will get me C. So for example, I know that if I was to lay on a guilt trip, maybe that if I had nobody to mind my kids this Saturday night and I really wanted to go somewhere and it was very important and it was a really important friend, right? So if I'm guilt tripping you to elicit your empathy to get you to do the thing that I want, but they will feel so entitled to do this. So they won't look any further into actually where is this coming from? Because they'll think ultimately you should do this. And when you say no to the narcissist, that's where you will see their wrath. Yeah, so you will see all the punishing behaviours. And for a lot of children that grow up in an environment like this is instilled from such a young age, like from pre-verbal, from toddlerhood. So they will just know that, oh no, I could never say that to my parent. Oh no, I couldn't say no. Oh no, I have to do this thing just to keep the peace. Like a bit like you and your siblings looking at each other going, no, don't do that. Or can I say this? Because it's instilled in you and your nervous system that actually what is the safer options. Yeah, so emotional abuse is insidious. I call them, and I hear loads of other experts calling them this too. This is not my own phrase that I made up, but it's death by 1,000 cuts. So one cut you can heal from. This is okay if this is in an isolated incident, but this is death by 1,000 cuts. It's done repeatedly over time, and it's so damaging.
And because it goes on forever, I think it's hard, as you said, to recognize it as abnormal or harmful.
Because it is your normal. Right? This is the thing. When you grow up in a situation like this, it is your normal. But like you said, you don't know it's harmful and you don't know that it's unhealthy or abusive.
Yeah. It's strange. I wasn't until I was in my mid-30s that I realized that my romantic relationships tended to mimic that sort of anxiety. Or I guess... What was the example you gave with, the amygdala exposed, right? That sort of, I guess, fear, like waiting for the bad thing to happen.
Waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah. It took me a long time in my marriage now to understand that that wasn't going to happen. Luckily. But I think I went probably the first 2 years just thinking, okay, it's going to happen. When is it going to happen? So I guess...
so you're braced for it. Your nervous system is primed.
Yes, exactly.
And then it acts accordingly. So this is acting out of the survival response. Or in relationships, and the same, like I'm married, how do we behave when our partner is pissed off with us? Which, of course, they're going to be, especially. I mean, this is healthy. So how do we behave when they're annoyed, when they're unhappy, when they want to do something? What do we do? Do we, the hyper-independent, push them at arm's length? Do we withdraw, right, in order to try and keep ourselves safe? Or do we fawn and capitulate and abandon ourselves and, no, it doesn't matter what I want. Here, just please don't be mad at me anymore.
Yeah. And I guess you can tell me what is the healthy response to this. But for me, like once I recognized the relationships I was choosing, the bad relationships I was choosing, or the sort of instinctive responses I had, like to fix things, once I became aware of it, I started to resist. I would step away and think about why do I feel like this? Why am I acting like this? And I feel like that has been the best way for me to overcome those feelings. But that's
amazing. Firstly, yes, again, so normal, what I would say is that this is typical. So somebody that has grown up in an abusive relationship, what we see is that how likely they are to repeat that pattern, either with friendships, with work relationships, with romantic relationships. Because again, what they have been, tolerated, but told what love is. This is love. I'm doing this because I love you so much. So now if you're in a relationship and he's telling you, I don't want you to go out because I'm worried that something's going to happen to you, or other men are going to chat you up, or whatever the thing is, and I'm only doing this because I love you. If you've witnessed control, it's like, this is familiar, right? Or the part where phoning. So one, what's huge is that when you are in conflict with your partner, that you recognize that when we are triggered in fight or flight, that you are taking a step back from that. What can happen when we're in a partner, if our partner is anxious, so if they're the phoner, so let's flip this around. And so let's say if this is you and you're the phoner or the people pleaser, and now your partner is angry or upset and he needs to take a break, that we, the phoner, now might follow him around the house and be like, no, please, let's just sort this. And he's like, no, I can't. No, right. Because they're going to feel that this is emotional abandonment. No, let's talk about this. So one, having language that the person that is leaving. So if that is you and you're in the middle of a discussion, a heated discussion, any sort of like conflict, and you need to take a break, it's your responsibility to convey that to your partner and tell them when you're coming back. So for example, okay, like I'd say either like my head's busted right now, I can't think clearly. I need to take a break from this, but we'll talk about it this evening. Or I need to take a break from this. I'm going to give you a call later. So I'm reassuring you, my partner, to let you know that I am taking a break, but I am coming back. Because if I say I can't talk about this anymore, especially for somebody that has gone through abuse, like that can trigger them. And it's like, oh no, you're leaving me, you're abandoning me. So it's up to me. That's my responsibility if I'm taking that step away, if needed for the person to say that. I actually run a parenting workshop for children that have grown up in dysfunctional environments who then become parents themselves. So I talked about me having my own kids. And so although I was a slow learner, and actually a catalyst of that was me having my own kids. So although I knew all of this theory and I knew all of this like logically in my rational brain, it was when I had kids and I actually realized how every part of me, there's no way I could have treated my kids in the way I was, that I actually saw how intentional a lot of the abuse was. And no, you don't have to have kids in order to do this healing. We can see this when, just in how you feel about somebody that is vulnerable. If you think of somebody, there's an intentionality that possibly my own denial I didn't want to see, but that I couldn't deny with my own kids. And when I saw how they were being treated, it really was a catalyst for real change. But one thing that I wasn't prepared for then is what you're talking about, like triggers in romantic relationships, is being triggered from my own kids, right? So being triggered for, that consistent mommy, right? And me being triggered, like me needing to take a break, but not having the autonomy because obviously they were dependent on me. Or when you're talking about sibling abuse, I grew up where siblings, like when I tell you that they would batter each other and that was normal, like I remember sharing that then. So when I was training as a therapist, I had to do 50 hours of my own therapy. And so I would be sitting there going, oh, I'm just here because, I have to be because my training. But I was willing. I was like, I want to go deeper. I want to go do the work. Like, let's see what happens. But I remember it was like 15 sessions in or even more. And my therapist said something and I said, oh yeah, no, he used to batter them. And she was like, what? And I went, oh yeah. I was like, that's normal, right? Obviously, I did a lot of unpacking and unpicking. But now with my own kids then, when they would be rough playing or teasing each other, my nervous system would be activated because my nervous system can't tell the difference between teasing and emotional abuse. Right? I can tell it in the difference when I'm an adult in relationship, but here I am protecting my children. And so until I was able to separate out and be like, no, this is what abuse is, and be able to, because I used to intervene too quickly, right? Which then gets them more dependent on me. So I really struggle with control. Where do I stop and shut this down? And I'm really talking like minor rough play, and I'm talking about minor slagging or teasing, right? Like really what I can see now is healthy. But when they were younger, my nervous system would be activated and I would go in and stop it, shut it down and not allow it. Whereas this is where a lot of like healthy humor and fun and sarcasm and healthy relationships are drawn. So what you're talking about sounds really healthy. that you are recognizing when you're getting elevated, when you're getting triggered, where you might be going around in circles, where you aren't making any headway. And you're saying, I need to take a break and I'm going to come back to this. And you're able to go back to the relationship and then have a constructive conversation. So you are not fawning and abandoning yourself, but you are not there standing, defending yourself with armor, not allowing any of this in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. And do you think, like going back to sibling relationships and the circumstances where this estrangement might happen because of an abusive parent, I say that because I understand there might be estrangement or low contact because of a mental health issue or addiction. But if it's a parent that's sort of driving a wedge or forcing the child to choose, it doesn't sound like there's much hope for those siblings to have a relationship as long as one of them remains loyal to a parent that is abusing them. Emotionally abusing.
So this is a really hard part. One of the chapters in the book is actually called Killing the Hope, because the hope is the part where we can have denial and want something to be different. So let's even use this in terms of addiction. When siblings are dealing with parents with addiction, you can have somebody saying, well, she or he is stealing from me, they're abusive, they're not kind around my kids, they're harmful, I don't want to be around them. And you can have another child, another sibling saying, but this is not their fault. Like they're an addict and this is going to kill them if you do that. This has damaged them so much, right? So they can be aware of how harmful the behavior is, but are still encouraging you to be a part of it. Which, when we're talking about in these systems, there's typically enmeshment. So when we talk about closeness, it's generally that we're not able to separate boundaries. It's an over closeness and an over reliance where we can't turn around and say, okay, you need to do this for you, but I'm going to separate that. Like I can support you. That's not for me, but I'm not going to punish you for doing that. But there's enmeshment. There's not these healthy boundaries, which for in your case, what I wonder, and you mightn't want to share this, but for 4 children to go no contact is huge. Or 3, I don't know if you said the 3 or 5.
There's 4 of us.
Okay, 4 to go no contact. There can be such a reliance and a dependence that we have had to have each other to keep safe, that now it might be scary for any of us to have independence in different ways because, you're nodding, because we had to rely on each other so much.
Yeah, I do wonder about that a lot. I think we all skew toward the hyper independent side of things, but we are reliant on each other. I mean, I live far away. They're all in the US and I live in the UK, but we text all day, every day.
Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's the question that I would ask is there punishment for somebody if they don't do that?
Well, it hasn't happened,
another way,
but I'm trying to
it hasn't
wonder,
happened.
like, how I would respond if
or
that
what I
happened.
see is with the parentified child is that one of the adult children is the parent being worried and anxious. Oh, we haven't heard from you. How are you doing? Yeah, because I can't cope with my anxiety if I haven't heard from you, and I need you to reassure me. So this is one of the ways that we can see that in adulthood, that we can parentify people around us, thinking that we know best or we know what's best for you, because ultimately we don't want to see you hurt. And so we can see this part play out then in relationships and relational dynamics. And for somebody then going on being a parent like myself then, and at the beginning, and I don't know if I'm jumping too far around, you talked about yourself and choosing not to be a parent. Is this okay to talk about this here? Yeah. I remember for me, I absolutely didn't want to be a parent. I was told explicitly and implicitly that I was a cold-hearted bitch. And so I believed that. My hyper-independence was to the point that I didn't think that I would be able to love a child or give them what they needed. And what I witnessed in my own family was engulfing of a child. But what I didn't realize was that wasn't healthy love. And so I was like, I don't want to do that. I couldn't give that to a child. But what I didn't know was that was smothering a child. I didn't know that was unhealthy. And so I had huge fears and huge trepidations around it. And then I had decided that I wanted to, but still had such fear. And so, yeah, I don't know what brought me to that to share, but I think it's amazing how our behaviors and our responses can be linked. Yeah. Not the decision to not have children. I want to clarify that. I'm not saying that anybody that decides their own autonomy. I'm talking about, that was in reference to when we're talking about our own anxiety in relationships, let's say with our siblings, and if one doesn't contact, how would my nervous system respond to that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you shared that because before we started recording, I told you that I've never wanted kids, but people usually assume that because I'm estranged from my mom, that's why I don't want my own kids, which makes sense. But
it denies your autonomy and your wanting that. So there's an erasure of yourself in that I think is, I'll let you speak. I think is unfair.
I admit they're probably related in a way because I do feel anxious about anything in my care, which I assume goes back to looking after my sisters from a young age. I have a dog, and my husband would tell you that I worry a lot unnecessarily about the dog. So I am aware that having a baby might put me over the edge.
I remember not wanting kids because I had been a parent my whole life. I was like, I want freedom. I don't want to have to be a parent again. Like I've done that. Yeah. And what you're talking about then is our nervous system, that when we love somebody, right, people close to us that we love, even here you're talking about your dog, how do I still get to have my own nervous system, my own freedom? Yeah. My own responses in that and not lose myself to the needs of somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a struggle. I think that, I don't see an end for me in that.
Well, that's the work that we heal in healthy relationships. Like that is the truth. So I think back to earlier when I was saying like 50% of the work is recognizing dysfunctional and abusive relationships. And then learning the other 50 is like learning how to be in healthy relationships and learning how to be with ourselves and being okay in our own skin. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's identity building.
I want to ask, before we wrap up, since I have a psychotherapist here, because there's so much discord about estrangement and claims from usually people who haven't experienced it, that these are typically adult children who are just becoming estranged on a whim, or
I can feel my anger rising,
or due to some kind of entitlement. Do you see any truth to that as a therapist? And I wanted you to address this other claim that people are just taking to advice on social media to become estranged, which I've never seen. I've never seen anyone say you should become estranged or go no contact with your family, or that therapists are advising clients to go no contact. All of those, what I see to be lies. Can you speak to those things?
I can answer that clearly. No, I don't think that adult children are doing this on a whim or doing this because they're being manipulated by therapists. I, as a therapist, would never tell somebody to go no contact. That is usually done as a last resort. That is done when the adult child has gone repeatedly back time and time again, hoping for something to be different, hoping that they will stop the attack, that are hoping that things can be different. It is so painful for the adult child that steps away. There is such grief in that, grief in the, not so much with the parent that they have, but in the parent that they wished they'd had. There's a death in that. There's a grief in that. There's also a grief then in the healing and recognize, holy shit, the personality that I thought I had, no, that was a trauma response. That was a survival response. Now there's also like a death in that, like shedding, like who am I? Who do I get to be? There's such a grief in the childhood that the children miss because they had to be mini adults, so they don't get to play and have fun. One of the things when we're in survival response, we really struggle to connect with silliness and free play, because no, like there's more important stuff to do. So no, in answer to your question, I don't think that somebody does this on a whim. But what I do think with social media is that social media has given people a space to talk about this so that it is more known, so that more people are coming forward and are sharing their story, which actually is just giving then the other side ammunition to say, oh, see, this is everybody that's just talking about it. Generally what I see in my work and from, my own podcast and receiving letters is that people have tried desperately so hard for this not to happen, because what I see is that it's not typical what you have in your situation. It's wonderful to see that you've kept a relationship and a healthy relationship with your siblings. I do know of other cases, yes, it can happen. But typically what I see is when one person steps back, they end up losing not only their parents, their siblings, and their extended family, because you now have done the ultimate sin or the ultimate betrayal by saying no and speaking about the abuse. Whereas in these family dynamics, they just want it to be swept under the rug and ignore it.
All right. Well, I feel like I could ask you 100 more questions, but
I love these conversations. And it's so important, this work, to share with people so that people don't feel so alone, because, that's the belief that there's something wrong with me, that I'm broken, and you're not broken. For anybody listening, you learned a set of survival responses to survive. But now is the time to look at that, to listen to podcasts like this, to read books. Mine is called You're Not the Problem, The Impact of Narcissism and Emotional Abuse and How to Heal. It's like a book of two halves. The first is about recognizing what abuse is, to give people language for the stuff that they've gone through, so that they're able to anchor themselves and be like, oh, that's what it is. It's something that they've known, but because they've been gaslit, they gaslight themselves as well. And then the second half is about healing. And then if anyone's interested, if they want to go on my website, katiemckenna.ie, I run those workshops for parents.
Perfect. I'll share all that in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for coming on the Bad Mothers podcast and explaining all of this for our listeners.
You're very welcome. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Bad Mothers is written, produced, and edited by me, Monica Cardenas. I'd love it if you'd rate and review the show and get in touch with any feedback. You can find me on my Substack, and guess what? It's called Bad Mothers too.